welcome. My name is Tim Odum. I'm the president of the AAM Group, and we operate the Engine Pro program. And today we have
Kevin Kidd.
Director at RFK Racing. Kevin and I, we've been talking here today. We go back, way back. I've known him for longer than anybody else probably in this industry, now I think about it.
Yes.
In terms of, that might be here. At that time, your dad was involved in a racing operation for his business. Is that what inspired you to move into the racing industry?
Yeah, it is. I definitely got drug into it by the family and Dad specifically. Dad's racing journey started probably 20 years even prior to that, with him driving cars at the local dirt track himself, and it was just something that he was always interested in. And when I was 7 or 8 years old and very impressionable, I was introduced to this cool thing called NASCAR, and all these years later, still in it.
So you became an engineer specifically with the intent to use that for your NASCAR or for racing?
I did, yeah. So, right around the turn of the century is when I was going through college and looking to get into a full-time career. And that's really when engineering as a discipline became very structured and really took off on a rocket ship within NASCAR. So I maybe divine intervention or whatever you want to call it, but I recognized that and decided to pursue the engineering degree, and that's definitely helped me get my start and has helped me all along the way.
Right. Now, we're with the Engine Pro Group, and of course, our audience is machine shops, engine builders, and obviously, with your background, you've done everything from engineering, crew chiefing on some very storied teams, race director, you've got a lot of experience there. So I want to talk a little bit about how the engine side of things in racing maybe relate to our audience. I sent you a note and talked about the fact that it used to be, when I started this industry, you'd see races and every team would seem to be looking for the weak link. They would build an engine, build more power, and then something would break. And it was like every weekend something was breaking, and it doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So how has engine building in motorsports moved from this situation where they were constantly developing and building power and finding weak link to what it is today?
The weak link thing was definitely very prevalent early in my career, and it seemed like it was always valve springs.
Yes.
2005, 2010, that timeline in NASCAR, we were all chasing just higher and higher RPMs, and that was before gear rules and things like that came into play. So we were, legitimately turning 11,000 RPM in races, and for a small block V8 engine, that's a lot of RPM.
It sure is.
Obviously valve springs were a big part of being able to actually accomplish that. And it seems like you'd kind of come up on a valve spring selection and get that working for a while, and then as you say, then it would kind of move to maybe a push rod or a rocker arm or something like that would start breaking, and then you could kind of design your way out of that, and then raise the RPM up more, and then you get back into valve springs. And so there's this never-ending cycle. I can remember, there's been enough years past now that I can tell this story, but right when that whole thing started, I was working for a team that was affiliated with the Penske engine shop, and at the time Roger was, and still is, I think, involved with Ilmor.
Right.
And Ilmor had spent the majority of that time leading up to that point in categories outside of NASCAR, and Roger was the first one to bring him in NASCAR, and so they designed an entire top end of an engine to do, to chase this RPM thing, and so. I remember doing a live 700-mile test at Charlotte Motor Speedway with an ARCA car with a Cup R&D engine in it, and this car, all we did to it all day was go out, run a fuel run, come in, put tires on it, and just send it right back out. We just did the whole thing. That was a very archaic way of doing durability testing,
right.
But that's what we had at our disposal at that time.
Right.
Fast forward to all these years later, all that work happens on really awesome transient dynos that all of our engine shops have, and you can do the full durability testing and do multiple durability testings, and never leave the building. So it's come a long way. I think the dyno equipment specifically has really been the thing that's moved that needle.
So I referenced to you that the first thing I saw in that world was a spintron, where we were able to run an engine drive and actually see how it might perform. And today, obviously, technology's come a lot further, but you're not just testing durability, you're testing durability for a specific type of track or race environment, aren't you?
Absolutely. So durability testing today happens very specifically for tracks. Like before we run the Daytona 500, pretty much every engine shop out there is doing something new for speedway racing every year, and they're very specifically doing durability testings for the 500 or for Talladega, whichever one has sort of the more strenuous cycles. But then, we go road racing, and we're coming up here in a few weeks going to Mexico City, and that's kind of a whole new environment with different climate conditions, and the atmospheric pressure is going to be different, and all these things due to altitude. So our engine shops have all been hard at work dealing with that problem to make sure that the engines are successful there as well.
That's your first time there?
In the Cup Series, yes. If you go back 10 years ago, the Xfinity Series ran there for a couple years in a row.
So, Mr. Tech, how do you profile that track in your testing when you haven't run it before?
Simulation and a lot of, it's amazing where the world has taken us, and we can generate a lot of data about a racetrack just by simply having components of that racetrack. If you know the geometry of the racetrack through a LiDAR scan, and the car that you're taking to it, and the tires that are going to be bolted on, and the aerodynamics of that car, you can do a whole lot of stuff in simulation to then generate the data that you need to plug into the dyno to be able to do the durability testing. So
wow.
It's a pretty neat world.
So the engine shop it's more or less a standalone operation within a race team.
Yeah.
And you got the crew chief, and the crew chief has expectations of the engine shop, and those expectations maybe have changed over the past 20 years a little bit. How is the dynamic between those two halves of the organization?
When I first started my career, it was us versus them. And it was a lot of throwing grenades at each other. Everybody was doing that.
Yeah, right.
But it's gotten way better over the years. And I think what most all the pro teams have learned is that when you cooperate with each other, it leads to success for one another. And so what does that mean? The engine shops, they're not necessarily the ones that are out there generating that simulation data to get the dynos up and running. They need to rely on the car teams to do that.
Right.
So the car teams will do their part, hand that data over. Conversely, there's things that only the engine shop can do that the race teams rely on. And so I think there's a good appreciation of one another's role in this thing. And this is one thing that Jack Roush has always beat into my head. At the end of the day, it's not an engine or a car separately. These two pieces come together, right, and build a race car that we go race.
Right.
And if we can get those things working together in synergy, then we stand a better chance of winning the race.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, winning the race is all that any of us really care about. So it's in our best interest to always cooperate, work with them. We help sort of pace and guide their development path. And then as they're doing things, they're actually completing the feedback loop, which then helps our development path. And so it goes back and forth.
Right. So I was at Roush facility some years ago, and they told me a story about it's not always the power that an engine can develop. Sometimes there are other things that the engine shop can contribute to competitiveness. Mm-hmm. Could you share a story there?
Yeah. This is another one. Jack Roush, he likes to refer to it as total vehicle power, okay, which to all the engine people out here might mean like, hey, what's power to rear wheels? Well, no, that's not what Jack means. In his view of this, it is how performant is the car in its total. And so an example of this, if you go back a previous generation of the NASCAR Cup car, Gen 6 is what we called it. That Gen 6 car, the way the aerodynamics on the car were, all the air entered through the grill, and then that air got evacuated past radiator and oil cooler into the underhood area of the car, which then built pressure, and it really was a detriment to downforce.
Right.
Well, for most of the race tracks that we go to, downforce is king, and you need to have as much of it as you possibly can. And so you get into these games of, how much tape can we run on the grill to be able to get, as little air in there as possible to cool the thing and satisfy the engine requirements, but also get as much downforce as possible. And then along the way, we started realizing, well, wait a minute, if we can run that engine hotter,
Right.
we can tape this thing down even more, generate even more downforce, and now the total car is faster. And so we chased that probably a good 5 years, and temperatures, in the end, before the whole thing changed, temperatures got pretty absurd where we were running, 300 degrees water temp and not thinking twice about it. And,
That's hot.
Yeah. We would have complete, closed loop water systems that would never purge, and, you'd blow the tank off the car before, anything else would happen. And so it just got pretty fun from an engineering exercise.
How far can you go? What are the limits?
Yes, absolutely. You just kept pushing and pushing and pushing on that, and it got all the way down to like the very core fundamentals of the engine block and what the water jacket design was like, and there was just so much hardcore engineering that went into just chasing that problem. Millions of dollars literally spent chasing that problem, and it was all because we were making the race car faster. The engines didn't like it. We were actually probably making less power by a little bit. That was part of the game, right? Was making as much power as you can at those temperatures. And they found ways to mitigate that, but it was still a huge engineering exercise where the car shop and the engine shops all worked together on.
But you were still trying to build the maximum amount of power you could, and you were looking for power if you could get it.
We were trying to build the fastest race car we could.
Yeah, okay.
And in the end, yes, we're trying to build as much power as we can, given a certain acceptable level of compromise to achieve the higher water temp.
So that was one of my questions is when you're building these engines for reliability, as a crew chief, as the director of operations, what is your tolerance for more power versus some risk of less reliability, or has the science got to the point now you don't have to make that discernment?
I mean, boy, we're pretty good now. We don't have to make that decision a whole lot anymore. Occasionally, special circumstances, the engine shop might call you and say, hey, we've got something new we're working on, and you're in a position, you're already in the playoffs, or you got your feet under you for the future here. Is this something you'd want to go try? Now, before we ever get that call, they've run like 6 races on it in durability testing at the shop. So, for us, we kind of, even though we're getting that call and they're like sort of teeing it up as some level of risk, it's more, hey, this is just different.
Right.
And we don't blink an eye at that. It's like, oh yeah, you think you got something better? Come on, let's do it.
So, but in terms of risk, would you accept more risk if your team is not moving toward the playoffs? You need to do something more drastic?
Yeah, it's each team's a little different on this. So I don't want to sit here and say it's a one-size-fits-all approach. Some teams, maybe they're like right on the edge of being in the playoffs or not. They might not accept that risk and just put the hey, we're going to make the playoffs on our racecraft, or, all the other variables that play into executing a race weekend. But then, you may have somebody that's, 5-10 positions out from the playoff, just says, hey, we'll pin our ears back and let's go after it.
Yeah. All right. Well, any questions from the audience? All right. Any questions? All right. Well, Kevin, it's good to see you again after, 40 years or almost 40 years?
Almost 40 years.
Thank you very much. Kevin Kidd, RFK Racing Director, thank you for your time today.
It's been a treat, Tim. Thanks.
Thank you.